So let's recap. Floraverse is an open source webcomic. Floraverse has 3 key players in its creation: Glitchedpuppet, better known as Glib, Marl, their ex-husband, and Eevee, their current wife. The 3 of these were in a polyamorous relationship. Before the conception of Floraverse and its adult companion comic, Forbidden Flora, there was Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers, typically shortened to PMDE, which was a community on DeviantArt. Their community focused on role-playing as multiple Pokemon within the Pokemon universe and thus featured primarily young people. Despite this, Glib would allegedly multiple times depict these Pokemon in sexual situations, oftentimes against their will and with an age difference between the 2 parties. Glib would link to these stories without giving warnings about their adult nature, as well as purposely cutting their stories short and encouraging people to read the rest on their Tumblr. Glib would also admit to finding the concept of an adult teaching the young about sex to be interesting. They would also feature their alleged self-insert character PK, presumably named after their former nickname, Purple Kecleon, raping a young character. Glib would also create a Tumblr blog in which they'd take on a sexual mentor role where they'd try and teach children about sex, proving they were very well aware of their young audience. Eventually, they would shut down Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers and encourage people to instead go follow Floraverse, hinting at the fact that the characters people knew and loved may show up in that comic. At the same time, they get into various online spats with people such as the voice actor Sean Chiplock, the YouTuber Jaywitz, and Steven Universe writer Matt Burnett. They would also get called out by their former partner, Pango Solvent, who would claim that Glib had been a poor partner while dating, and allegedly hadn't respected Pango Solvent's feelings and forced them to work under strenuous work conditions. Pango Solvent would allege that Glib's at the time husband, Marl, was trying to get people to have sex with his dog, and multiple people would both come out and say Marl had approached them about the same suggestion, as well as stating their own poor experiences with Glib. Eventually, Marl himself would come out and admit to liking people having sex with animals, but he did not appreciate this being public knowledge. After Pango Solvent published this private message, Glib and Marl would threaten Pango Solvent with a lawsuit unless they took the post down. Not wanting to get sued, Pango Solvent would do as told, but things were only getting started. After Pango Solvent's allegations, another person would come forward. This time allegations against Marl would come out by a person called Lane, also known as Spaggledagger. Lane would allege how they used to look up to the Floraverse crew and was excited to join their community. However, they'd eventually, despite being a minor, find themselves in an NSFW IRC chat. According to Lane, they were never asked their age before being allowed into this chat. Following this, Lane would start talking privately with Marl, who would allegedly soon start introducing Lane to his fetish for bestiality. He would also be very upfront about wanting to have sex with Lane, despite them being a minor. After coming out with these allegations, Glib would take to Twitter to discredit and attack Lane, calling them a parasite among other things. Glib would also allege that Lane had told their age almost immediately after entering the server. They would also allege that multiple other webcomic communities were afraid of Lane, because Lane had apparently spread rumors like this before and even threatened to entrap people with child porn, although they never produced any evidence of this. Lane's allegations would get more validity, as in 2018, logs of Marl talking with a minor called Big Fluff would be revealed to the public. In the logs, Marl can be seen trying to recruit Big Fluff into making bestiality porn videos, as well as Marl revealing he's done it before and is part of a bigger network of like-minded individuals. Big Fluff would also allege to have visited the Floraverse crew's house, where they'd bumped into Glib in the nude. Glib would, however, vehemently disagree with this ever happening. After the Big Fluff logs were dropped on the Floraverse Discord, a mod of the server would talk with the person dropping the logs there. The mod, Gaypub, would convey for Marl that the logs were real and that Marl was sorry that he had hurt the people involved. However, despite Marl admitting to the logs being true, Gaypub would try to discredit their validity, actively, knowingly, protecting a person who just admitted to trying and having minors have sex with animals. Due to all this going down, another former partner of Glip, Jungle Kava, would make a statement saying how, when they were dating Glip, Marl had allegedly also tried to get Jungle Kava to have sex with him and their dog. Jungle Kava's story correlates with multiple parts from both the Big Fluff logs as well as Lane's allegations, with stuff such as Marl having an interest in having sex with fans at cons. Due to all of this, a toy company selling Floraverse merchandise, ESC Toys, would allegedly stop their cooperation with Floraverse. It was clear that something had to give, as this was now too big to sweep under the rug. Two days after the logs were leaked, Glip would make an announcement stating that they were gonna leave the internet forever. They wrote, "Hi everyone, due to unrelenting harassment over lies and bullshit, I'm finally tired of fighting. I'm done posting online. I thought I could keep going, but people only ever have more and worse lies, and I don't know what to do about it. So that's it. My whole household has done their best to deal with and fix issues and misunderstandings we've caused or whatever. But that's irrelevant if people don't actually care about that and just want to make up the worst possible things out of spite. I'm disgusted and speechless and done. I'm not going to be looking at any replies to this account anymore, so I'm really sorry for anyone who wants to stay in touch, but I can't keep going like this. Goodbye everyone. I'm really glad I got to share art with you all." They would then proceed to lock their Twitter account. Meanwhile, Eevee was alleging that the logs had been edited, stating, "I do have every reason to believe the logs going around have been edited, but I have no way to prove it. Even if I did, it wouldn't matter. I know this because the logs are being spread right alongside old screenshots of stuff Glib and I have said, and explained and apologized for repeatedly for years. Nothing we say ever matters." Alongside this disconnect from the internet, the trio would then put their house up for sale and move out of the state they lived in. Alongside this, the trio would also get their names changed. One could be persuaded to think that they knew how severe the allegations were and were thus trying to do everything in their power to distance themselves from the whole thing. Time passed with no news from the trio until May of 2018, where Eevee would break the silence, making a lengthy post on their Patreon about how Kiwi Farms had basically ruined their lives. Eevee would call the Kiwi Farms stalkers and claim they would fabricate stories out of nothing, yet curiously also mention how they never really lie. And once more, they would claim that the logs were edited, yet would lament their inability to find the real logs. Glib would be the next to break the silence, as they too, a couple of months later, would tweet out a picture of their cat. Without getting into too much detail on how this information was found out, it was eventually deduced that the trio was now staying at Marl's parents' house in a different state, based on information found in the picture that Glib had posted. It was also around this time that Glib would announce that they and Eevee had divorced Marl. "V and I are parting ways with Marl. More details soon. Hey everyone, if you were wondering why the fuck did Glib never address X, want to know further? Marl has finally fucking written up something that needed to be written up years ago, and he and I are getting a divorce. Here it is." Not only that, but they would also publish an apology allegedly written by Marl in which he confessed to being a zoophile, but only in fantasy, and that the logs were edited to make him look worse than he actually was. The original document has been hard to track down, but fortunately it has been archived, although the archive would constantly have issues, so for the sake of prosperity, I will now read it in its entirety.
I am Marl, former partner of Glip. They are moving on without me, and they are 100% right to do so. I have abused their trust over and over so many times over the course of an entire decade. The least I can do for them now is to finally address the rumors that I have allowed to circulate unchallenged over the years. I am not a pedophile ringleader. I do not spend my time grooming potential victims. I have never attempted to get a child who lived next door to visit my house for sex. I will never do that. I have no interest in children. The person circulating these rumors knows who they are. They have done this before to other people. And for the longest time, I was too afraid to say they were lying. I didn't want them to make up more rumors in retaliation. I thought, stupidly, that if I just stayed silent and ignored them long enough, they would go away. But that's never how it works. It would have been easy for me to refute the rumors when they started, but I didn't. I allowed those rumors to grow and grow because that's what happens if you don't stand up and say something. The rumors just get worse and people begin to believe they must all be true. My cowardice forced Glip to become the public face of the rumors targeting me, and my failure to act has tainted their name and their creations. And every time Glip defended me, my silence and unwillingness to do anything about the rumors made it appear like they defended and supported a child predator. I was too afraid of everything, and I let that fear control my life. It began to infect the people I love and everyone who'd ever talked to me. I was not a good partner, and I was not a good friend. I had sexual fantasies involving dogs a long time ago. For the longest time, I failed to realize how abusive that fetish was. I would talk about it to people at the drop of a hat if I thought they had even the slightest bit of interest in or curiosity about the subject. I wanted to be seen as cool and experienced, so I would make up stories in which I'd turned my fantasies into realities. It was all an effort to get people to like me or think I was interesting. I know how dumb that is, but it's what I genuinely believed at the time. I like to get people to like me. I had a dog at one point, and I began to include him in these lies. I finally realized that I didn't want to act on these fantasies, not really. So I gave him away to someone who actually cares about him. I no longer have those fantasies. I am ashamed I ever had them, and I'm ashamed for telling stories about them. I never told Glip about any of that. The only thing I ever told Glip was that it was a very minor kink, something fun to see and very odd, but something I would never ever do in real life. No way. I never told them the truth. I never told them who I was talking about. I did my very best to keep them in utter darkness. I knew that if Glip found out, I would have to look at my actions and their consequences, and I was too afraid to do that. So when more rumors about me began to surface, Glip still defended me because they truly believed I was completely innocent of them. And I was for the most part. But because Glip didn't know who I had talked to or what I had talked about, they had no idea what to do and say when actually confronted by the rumors. It made Glip look like a giant fucking creep who sheltered not only a child predator, but also an animal abuser. And still, I allowed Glip to defend me. I allowed them to take the entire burden of the internet rumor mill. I watched as it threatened to destroy our lives, and I watched as it made Glip's name become inseparable from me and my failures. Their defense of me has cost them several friendships, and I still did nothing about it. I was a coward. Saying that doesn't make it okay, and it never will be okay, but it's the truth. I've also come to realize I pressured people into talking to me, whether it was about sex or anything else. I assumed that people would be fine with saying, no, I don't want to talk about this, or this makes me uncomfortable. But that's an awful assumption, and it's horrible for me to have made it. I should have been more sensitive to what other people wanted, but I never thought about what other people wanted. My mindset was always, just talk about literally anything. The other person will surely say something if they don't want to talk. When people began to post chat logs of me doing things, I understood exactly what it was I had done. Yes, all of the logs have been edited in ways to make me look extra shitty and creepy and made it look like Glip and Eevee were complicit in everything I did. But they weren't complicit because I never told them anything. But despite of all that, the logs do not lie when it comes to the basic reality that I pressured people into talking about things they didn't want to talk about. I know now that what I thought were fun fantasy talks were incredibly high-pressure, aggressive situations. Nobody should ever have to go through that. One person I spoke with at length, while of age, was young enough that there were a clear imbalance of life experience and power. The age gap was simply too large. I didn't think of any of that at the time, choosing instead to believe since it was just online, it was okay. I later realized how creepy and inappropriate everything I had talked about was, and I apologized to them for my actions and did not contact them again. This was years before any of these rumors began, and I never discussed sex or sex-related topics with anyone underage. I realize now how difficult it is to say no to someone, especially to someone like me who held a decent amount of power in the community I resided in. I never thought I was abusing my power to get people to talk to me, but I know now that what I think doesn't matter. What matters is the fact I did abuse my position. Intentional or not, it still does damage, and it's still an awful thing to do. And I still didn't tell Glib about any of this. I told them nothing. They tried to get me to tell them for years. They always wanted to know what I was up to, what I was doing. I would always respond with lies that even I believed. I had asked that Glib not talk about me to anyone, under the false hope that it would allow me to feel safe enough to open up to them about things I felt and thought. This was a terrible, awful thing to ask, and yet I asked it, and Glib did it because they thought it would help me. I deprived Glib of any kind of outlet they could have used to express their own thoughts and feelings. They never had the opportunity for a friend or a loved one to go, "Hey, what he's doing is fucked up, don't put up with it." And all it did was compound my fear of talking and of being talked about. If I had even the slightest suspicion that Glib was speaking about me to someone, anyone, I would spiral into self-obsessed depression. This is all I ever gave Glib for their efforts. Glib also couldn't vent about the lies and false rumors surrounding them, even in their own house. If they did, or if even suspected they did, or were about to, I would shut down and become almost entirely unresponsive to anything they said or did. Not just for that brief time period, but often for days. My self-pitying cowardly aura infected everyone in the house, and taught Glib they couldn't talk about anything to anyone anywhere. Not to their friends, not to their peers, not to me, and not even to Eevee. They had nothing, no outlet at all. I made it like that, and it did very real damage to them. I was not good for them. I lied to them constantly about everything. I let them defend me when I should have defended myself. I let them become affiliated with every little shitty thing I've done and said. I let them spend so much of their time and energy on me, and I would always give them nothing in return. It's completely my fault they're moving on without me. I know this. They have never done anything wrong. All they did was try and try and try, and I only ever punished them for it. The confession doesn't make it all okay. I can never make it okay. I have no excuse for what I have done. I just hope it brings some kinds of closure to anyone who reads it. To the people I frightened, made uncomfortable or pressured, I'm sorry. To the people who tried to be my friends and I abused their trust, I'm sorry. To the people who liked Floraverse and were turned away from it because of rumors surrounding Glib, I'm sorry. Glib did nothing. The rumors began because of everything I did. I did my best, my very best, to make sure Glib didn't know anything. I lied so much, just so that they wouldn't know what I've been doing. That's the kind of person I was. I caused so much damage to someone who cared so fucking much, it fucking hurts to even think about how much they cared. I have never in my life met anyone who cared as much or as deeply about fucking anything as Glib cared for me. I will never meet someone with the same capacity for love as Glib has. They gave me their life, their trust, their love, and I ruined it. And they gave it all to me again and again and again for 10 entire fucking years. And for 10 entire fucking years, all I did was punish them for making that effort. They only ever wanted me to show that I cared and loved them back. That's all they fucking wanted, and I never did it. I said it, but I never really showed it. All they had to go on was my word, which was fucking worthless. I'm logging off now for good. No one has to worry for the safety around me because I will no longer be around. No one has to worry about me being shitty anymore because I will no longer be around. To Glib and Eevee, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry that I ruined what should have been nothing but happy times. You both gave me your best for so long, for so fucking long, and all I ever gave you was my worst. Goodbye.
People were quick to be skeptical about this apology, as it framed Glib as somehow being the one true victim of Marl's alleged crimes, mentioning her a total of 27 times, and claimed that they were completely unaware of Marl's interest in zoophilia. Eevee is only ever mentioned in passing, despite them also being in the relationship, and when talking about these supposed alterations to the logs, the confession only ever focuses on how it implicated Glib in knowing about it all, instead of even touching how the logs were supposedly altered. And speaking of altering the logs, both Marl, Glib, and Eevee would claim the logs were fake, but would at no point ever publish the supposed unaltered logs. The skepticism seems to also have come from the letter seeming too convenient. It most of all talks about Glib's innocence in it all, brings up stuff that Glib and Eevee would later contradict in private, not address any of the other victims, and talk about how Glib apparently felt, despite Marl would have no way of knowing this. Glib would supposedly add the confession on a Google document themselves, which was supposed to be interspersed with their comments, but looking at it now, all one will find is a document with the title Breakdown of Marl's Apology Final, with only 3 lines saying, "Fantasy my ass. Yeah, at least this section is 10. Yep, it was utterly worthless." Perhaps due to finally breaking the silence of being gone from the internet a grand total of 4 months, Glib would continue to post on their Patreon page saying the following. "Even now, I'm not quite sure how to end this, because I can't bring myself to go look up every atrocious lie going around to debunk it. That's the whole reason I had to step away from the computer. I'm too tired to keep doing it. It takes a toll on my soul to have to constantly address things people say. It's worse when people go around faking horrible logs, because what are you even supposed to say to that? It doesn't matter that I have evidence to back what I'm saying up, and it doesn't matter that I have a ton of proof about the malicious intentions of the person who originally posted them. If it did matter, it would have ended in 2015, the first time I debunked this person's claims, before they found a bigger platform for them. If it did matter, then people would know that the person who posted the logs is someone who has gone out of their way to try and ruin multiple people by making claims of the same nature. Because this is something I've addressed before, more than once, but it doesn't matter because it's very easy to make a new anonymous name and to make new sets of claims. And I'm too tired to fight every single time someone shows up to pull this shit, especially when no one pays attention to malicious parties showing up with slightly different names and claims. I can't keep going." Glib would state that they had tons of evidence to counter the allegations raised due to the logs, but would however not post them for whatever reason. At the same time, Big Fluff had been forced into the spotlight due to all this and had to come forward and thus quickly earned the ire of Glib as well. They would tweet, "Then I get some fucking clown making tweets at me like, how could Spackle's story be false if it's the same as someone else's from later? Because they're fucking collaborators on the same fucking harassment site, and one of them is a skilled liar and a manipulator, you dumb fuck." But as time passed, the narrative would start to change. Glib would start to talk as if acknowledging the logs were in fact real, and would instead do their hardest to emphasize that they had no idea what Marl had been doing, tweeting out stuff such as, "I have all these fucking people mad at me over things, all this shit I never knew about. How fucked up is that? Meanwhile, it's taken me like 2 solid months to start unpacking all of the emotional abuse I went through that he used to make it so I could never ever have any idea who he was." However, a year later, the story would shift once again. In 2019, a Discord leak happened. A conversation between Glib, Eevee, and 2 other parties called Gooby Booby and Lucid Nonsense was revealed, and its contents were damning. The chat had Eevee and Glib talking very candidly about a time where Glib had been in Australia only to come home and find out that Marl had been with someone called XD, and that Marl had tried to involve XD in watching stuff with their dog at the time. It was also revealed that Glib had allegedly, years prior to this, told Marl that they did not want their dog involved in any of the stuff Marl was supposedly into. "With XD, I was in Australia and I came back and found out through XD that they had fucked. And that Marl had involved XD in watching stuff with our dog at the time, and I was like shell-shocked. We were just hanging out at the time. He didn't even realize Marl had told Ash.
I told him years prior, I don't want our dog involved in anything like this, and he acted like I was crazy for saying that. Marl would also choose to be vulnerable after doing something I didn't like and then telling me about it. And then I wouldn't feel like I'm not allowed to hurt him, he's trying to be vulnerable. Fuck. He'd not tell me about something shitty things until I found out. Then he'd act like...
The logs also revealed that Marl had tried to coerce Glib into being with animals as well, to which they had allegedly refused multiple times. Yet Marl would persevere and keep trying to push Glib to have sex with animals.
Yeah, well then he asked me days later if I wanted to do it and I said no, and he tried to get me to anyway. And I was like, what are you not understanding about no? He asked me not long after, I got really angry about XD and the dog thing. The fucking dog is still a mystery to me. I still don't know the full story there. Do you want to try stuff with our dog?
The jig was up. This proved that Glib knew about Marl's interest in involving people in his sexual interest with animals. However, Glib would try one last Hail Mary to try and change the narrative one last time. This would happen in 2020, where Glib would write a 116-page apology. The apology letter was divided into two parts. One was the apology letter taking up 41 pages, the other was Glib's account of Marl being almost twice as long with 76 pages. Even though there were over 75 pages dedicated to talking about just Marl, the apology letter also does a lot to try and push most of the blame of Glib's shortcomings onto him. At this point, Marl had become a boogeyman, the one who was the root of all the bad that had happened, despite of everything that had happened during the PMDE days that didn't seem to involve Marl at all. In the apology letter, Glib would go into each individual topic one by one to explain their thoughts and feelings on the matter. Unfortunately for those uninitiated, Glib would not explain the initial issue and allegations. They would start off with Big Fluff. Here they would admit that Big Fluff had in fact showed up at their house and that Glib had in fact showed up in front of Big Fluff in the nude, despite Glib lying about the contrary earlier. They would however state that they had an explicit no minors policy for people visiting the household, but what Glib had claimed was that there was never anyone there, not that they weren't allowed. To Glib's credit, they did apologize for being so quick to anger. However, problems would arise again when discussing the Big Fluff logs. Here, Glib would admit to not being allowed to research the logs, and only recently, as of posting the apology, would actually see anything concrete from them. This means that Glib was actively, vehemently arguing about the discredibility of the logs when they had in fact not seen them at all. The only thing they did see was the thing that implicated them, which could perhaps explain why that was the main focus in Marl's apology. In fact, they would go on to state that after seeing the logs for real, they believed them, and could even attest to their validity based on the way Marl types. Eevee, now Glib's wife, would also hop into the apology with some comments of their own, reiterating that they had believed the logs had been doctored, but never meant to imply that Big Fluff was the one altering them. Once more, to Glib's credit, they would go on to probably apologize to Big Fluff before moving on to talk about Lane. Here, Glib would admit to never checking for Lane's age, and would once again state that they only learned about Lane's age the day she was banned from the adult space. They state how after they'd banned Lane, they'd been approached by multiple people from different webcomic communities, and supposedly even Lane's friend, who would warn them about Lane and even warn them about Lane's dad as well. Ultimately, Glib would apologize to how they treated Lane and how they dismissed Lane's allegations against Marl. But we will return to this later. Glip and Eevee would also mention how Marl was apparently known for deleting stuff all the time, as well as closing tabs and apps whenever not using them, to the point where he was so overzealous in doing this, he would oftentimes close down some of Eevee's tabs on the living room computer, which seems to be their defense for why they would state that they didn't know what Marl was up to, which, again, was not what was shown in the leaked Discord messages mentioned earlier, where Glip would refer to Marl and XT watching videos that apparently involved someone having sex with their dog Apollo. It should also be noted that allegedly the trio would still keep their dog despite knowing it was in danger of being molested by Marl. Next up was Pengo Solvent, and this one was interesting. Apparently, Marl had shown interest in having sex with Pengo, which Glip was not a fan of. So, in their own words, the reason they had written the vent post, the one where they claimed Pengo's panic attacks were whimsical fears, was to destroy the chance that Pengo and them would reconcile, and through that ensuring that Marl could not meet with Pengo and thus hook up with him. When Pengo's call-out post had popped up, Glip admitted to having never fully read through it and only read it through what they had been shown or told by other people. This would continue to be a trend with Glip of them reacting to things they'd only gotten secondhand knowledge about. As far as the Pengo stuff, it's not really worth covering. It is clear that Marl had his claws deep in Glip and was manipulating them in an abusive relationship, which in turn made Glip act out against Pengo. They've since worked things out, and as of the apology letter, they are on good terms again. The apology would also cover various things, such as Glip allegedly changing their name from Purple Kecleon to Glitchedpuppet to avoid allegations of abuse, to which Glip would deny those allegations. They would also dive into the part of them leading people from their Pokemon stories on DeviantArt to their Tumblr, where things would get not safe for work without any warning, stating that they were not aware of sexual boundaries and chalking it up as being due to abusive experiences they had undergone, as well as the story where PK had sex with an underage character, stating that they didn't write that story and it came as a result of them wanting to see the character PK do something bad and feel guilt over it. One could be curious as to why they would then pick their alleged self-insert for this role that would be called PK, which is presumably a shortening for Purple Kecleon, the alias Glip was using at the time.
I wanted to see fictional representation of my pain repurposed and with different feelings accompanying it, because I never got any resolution about what happened to me as a kid. I was not aware of the kind of impact this work could have whatsoever. It makes me feel incredibly sad to see this portrayed as this person and their friends feeling like fetish fuel, because that is the furthest thing from the truth imaginable to me. I went through sexual assault as a kid and didn't want that for anyone else, ever. I did not have outlets for understanding what I had been through. I had no one to really talk to about it. I didn't even think I was allowed to talk about it publicly until later, as my mom had blamed me as a kid for it. And that was the response I expected. You deserved it. It's incredibly sad to hear the community had such a bad effect on this person. This is not something I would have ever wanted, and I'm sorry to hear it's impacted them in this way. I hope they're able to find closure however they need to do to deal with their unresolved feelings.
They would also start talking about how they had been sexually molested by their dad when they were 8 or 9 years old, and it was because of that they wanted PK to feel guilty about what they had done. The same excuse was given for the part where Glip had drawn the character N from Pokemon getting molested by their dad, as well as when they said they liked lowly and shorter stuff. They would furthermore go on to say that they did a lot of commission work simply because they had to, as they were expected to bring in money due to their parents being divorced. The second document, Glip's account on Marl, would go more into depth about how Glip's father had molested them once and tried again a second time. Failing that, they would allegedly turn their attention to Glip's brother. The story would go on about how their aunt allegedly died under suspicious circumstances, and it seemed like a murder disguised as a suicide, and they immediately follow it up by mentioning their uncle was not a very good person, seemingly implying that their uncle killed their aunt. When their parents got divorced, Glip alleges that they would live with the parents of their mom's best friends for some time before eventually moving into their mom's own place, where Glip would be emotionally and verbally abused. Glib would also account for their previous partner, dubbed Justin, who was emotionally abusive as well. Eventually, they would meet Marl, who would allegedly help them out of the tumultuous time that was their family life. Glib also accounts that already at the age of 16 and Marl was 20, Marl would allegedly try and groom Glib into being okay with animal stuff. Marl would explain how he had, at a young age, found a picture of his dad, who was a cop's, computer of a woman and a dog, which became very formative for him, and would even allegedly account for when he was 12 to hop the fence to the neighbor so he could orally stimulate the neighbor's dog. Eventually, Marl would supposedly propose to Glib when they were 17. Glib would agree to the marriage because it was their understanding that that was the only way to get financial aid due to their father's income, and if they didn't do it, they wouldn't be able to afford school. However, around this time, Glib and Eevee were getting close, and as a result, Glib would make art to reflect that. Marl had, however, found these images while browsing Glib's files and was furious. Glib was then apparently the one suggesting a polyamorous relationship as they, quote, needed to be with other people or I would be miserable. Despite a lot of opposition, Marl would supposedly relent and allow Eevee and Glib to be more intimate. However, once they started doing so, Marl couldn't handle it and forbade them from doing more together. Glib and Eevee would continue to date, however, despite Marl stating how it made him unhappy. The couple would then continue being miserable together, and the fact they didn't have any money probably didn't help. Marl would allegedly try and pressure Glib into making sex videos in order to sell them and make money. In Glib's own words, Marl gave me the impression that if I said yes, he would be very happy, and that if he was happy, then there wouldn't be a sexual restriction on what I could do with Eevee. So they would allegedly agree to making the videos. Marl would tell Glib that they had found a guy with a dog, that it would make a lot more money than regular porn. And Glib ended up agreeing to doing it and went on to go through with it. They would, however, later claim that they had now had sex with 2 dogs rather than 1. Now, reading the account of Marl and the apology letter, even if one tries to be as skeptical as possible about it all, it is almost impossible not to see how Marl was emotionally abusing Glib, and that he had a pattern of doing so. Marl would force his perverted fantasies on others, while emotionally preventing those around him from prying into it. He would allegedly prey on minors who were not mentally mature enough to defend themselves, and if all of this is true, then Glib is most definitely also a victim of what is a sick and twisted individual, and absolutely deserves sympathy like any other victim should. But do you remember this?
I have every single reason to believe Spaggle/Lane/Glib Predator House is lying, because she's left a trail of documented lies and destruction in her wake for at least 5 fucking years now. If I were not 1000% sure of this, I would not be so confident here. I'm loath to give another shred of attention to this fucking parasite.
Or this.
It's just insane. I cannot describe how fucking insane this has been. It makes me feel literally crazy. There are people who vehemently think some sort of wild child crime happened in our house when we never let anyone underage in our Vegas home. Ever. Period. Ever.
If what Glib says is true, while Marl was preying on children to get them to take part in his sick fantasies, Glib was actively discrediting the victims' stories of abuse, going on long tirades about how these children couldn't be trusted, how they were making things up, how the logs were fake, and how they supposedly had evidence to prove how these were nothing but lies. All while doing this, Glib knew all too well about their husband's fantasies, about his urges, about his manipulations, and about his lies. And it didn't take one person to come out and share warning signs that what allegedly happened to Glib was happening to them too. It didn't take 2. It didn't take 3 or 4. No matter how many people spoke out and showed warning signs that Marl was preying on them, Glib did nothing to protect them. Glib didn't warn them, Glib didn't help them at all. Instead, they facilitated Marl's lies. despite no one knowing better about the harm Marl was causing than them. Glib knew for more than 5 years as they were berating and name-calling and attacking the victims of Marl and did nothing. All of this? Lies. It would have been one thing if Glib had just stayed quiet, but as proven by multiple screenshots, they actively went out of their way to berate and name-call the different victims. Even Marl's admission of guilt is now questionable at best, as in it, Marl alleges that Glib never knew about any of this. How couldn't they? They were a victim of him as well. If this story is to be believed, Glib is a victim, but this also proves them to be a pathological liar. Glib and Eevee would state how they trusted Marl, hence why they would default to taking his side, but vehemently and repeatedly over multiple years, constantly discrediting and attacking the multitude of similar allegations to come out about the very same person that did the exact same thing to them. But at least, now that the monster Marl was gone, things were finally going to be okay. Right?